Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 greatest Mozart violinists. Mozart actually wrote quite a bit of violin music. I mean, he really did. I mean, there's lots and lots of violin sonatas. And then, of course, there are the other chamber works, the trios and the things that feature the violin, the other chamber works. But boy, oh boy, his violin sonatas are very, very unplayed and unknown, mostly because they're pretty simple, I suppose, but they have absolutely gorgeous music throughout. All of them really do. And of course, the 5 violin concertos are marvelous, and the Symphony Concertante is amazing. And, so there's lots of Mozart for people to dig into. Now, I'm going to be dogmatic and say straight out, there are no great Mozart violinists playing on period instruments. There just aren't. Probably the closest two were Andrew Manzi and Giuliano Carmignola, who's actually pretty splendid. But the fact of the matter is, Mozart's violin music being so inherently vocal, singable, luscious, melodically fulsome, demands the entire resources of the modern violin and the modern violinist. Yes, you can be relatively abstemious in your use of vibrato if you'd like to be, but you must cultivate a warm, beautiful singing tone. And if you don't have that, you're in big trouble. You can't play Mozart. And unfortunately, today's period instrument orthodoxy, ironically, because the whole concept behind instruments and instrumental technique is to imitate the human voice, teaches players to do things which are anti-vocal, dry, desiccated, whiny, thin, unpleasant, and they attribute this just to the nature of the instruments. I mean, the fact that they're using gut strings or funky bows, or they have no end pins if they're cellos, or chin rests if they're violins, and all of that creates a different sound, which may have been what Mozart actually heard. But if that's what Mozart actually heard, he hated it. Let's put it that way. He wrote for an ideal singing tone, which is best realized, hands down, on the modern violin. So, I am willing to entertain your lists of the 5 greatest Mozart violinists, but do yourself a favor and save me the trouble of pushing the delete button by not including some of these period instrument wannabes. First of all, they're too recent, for the most part, to be considered great Mozart violinists. I mean, you need a little time for things to sink in, number one. And number 2, they just don't have the chops for it. They really don't. Believe me, when I hear one who can do it, I'll say so. I gave an excellent review to Giuliano Carmignola's Mozart Violin Concertos with Claudio Abbado. You can read it over on ClassicsToday.com. I think it's a splendid set. He comes the most. He has the tone. And that's the key. Either you have it or you don't. And so far, the period instrument crew doesn't really have it. And when modern instrumentalists try and pulverize their own timbre in order to approach that which we think speculatively Mozart may have actually heard, if not approved, then they do Mozart an injustice. They really do. That's my take on it. So you may or may not want to keep that in mind when you give me your lists. Anyway, the 5 greatest Mozart violinists are, first, Itzhak Perlman. Perlman is a surprise. He did all the violin sonatas beautifully, sensitively, tastefully. He did all the violin concertos similarly. Absolutely lovely Mozart violin playing. He doesn't get credit for it. He's supposed to be a hot and heavy, romantic violinist with just oodles and scads of vibrato. But he's a great musician, and he's far more intelligent than that. And he knows how to play Mozart like a great singer. And that's what we need. So Itzhak Perlman's up there. Anne-Sophie Mutter, she's another one. Most recently, she did a stupendous recording of Mozart violin concertos. And I was surprised because her romantic stuff has been way over the top. I mean, she did a grotesque Tchaikovsky concerto, and she's just slobbering all over the place, as often as not. But in Mozart, she behaves. Remember, she did them when she was like 3 with Herbert von Karajan. Remember those crazy album covers where they're switching sweaters and things like that, you know, that kind of stuff. But no, she's got poise and class and elegance and all of those things. And her recent DG concerto set was absolutely lovely. Recent. It's probably 10 years old by now. But, you know, I always think in geological time. So, yes, it's recent. Frank Peter Zimmermann, one of the avatars of the German school, the great German school. Here's a guy who does really modulate his vibrato, whose tone, basic tone, is somewhat austere compared to someone like Perlman, but who still has, in abundance, the smarts, the musicality, the taste, the sense of the long line, all of the things that you need to play absolutely gorgeous Mozart. And he did a recent set of violin concertos on Hensler. I think it was absolutely lovely. Really, really beautiful. A gorgeous series that is not getting much attention or play because it's a smaller label, and, you know, the classical music world is a complete catastrophe in terms of promotion and finding things and all of that stuff. But he's a wonderful Mozart violinist. Then, of course, we have the 2 classics. Yes, there are classics. David Oistrakh with the Berlin Philharmonic and his son Igor and some of these things. And wow, what a fantastic series of Mozart performances Oistrakh turned in. He was well, of course we know, one of the great all-time greats. And I just like it when these big deal romantic violinists return to Mozart and get it and understand how to enter the idiom while bringing just as much of their own, you know, sort of romantic personality to the music. You know, it's so good to hear Mozart that's played with a fulsomeness that goes beyond the merely nice, you know, and that has this certain bravura and richness to it. I mean, the music's got to have that. And last but not least, Arthur Grumiaux. Arthur Grumiaux was born to play Mozart. Oh my goodness, the guy just had the aesthetic in his bones. And it wasn't just the concertos, which are of course fabulous, which he did with Colin Davis on Phillips. I mean, it was everything else, all that chamber music. You know, he did the quintets, he did that fabulous, amazing divertimento in E-flat for string trio, the greatest string trio ever. You know, there was the Grumiaux quintet, the Grumiaux trio, the Grumiaux this, the Grumiaux that. He did violin sonatas with Clara Haskell and other great pianists. He did Mozart. And gosh, could he do Mozart. I mean, his performances have withstood the test of time, and quite frankly, the original instrument or period instrument people would do well to listen to Grumiaux, because there are certain performances of certain music which are just timeless. They have a rightness about them, and inevitability, and understanding of style. You know, how you string your violin, or, you know, what other doodads you do or use. There ought to be, let's put it this way, an exemplar, a reference that to which you should aspire as a musician. And Grumiaux is it. And I fully believe that there are ways of playing these musics. They're not going to sound like Grumiaux, obviously. There are ways to do it, ways to adapt whatever performance practice rituals you happen to be worshiping at that moment or indulging in, and still capture the spirit of the music. And Grumiaux captures the spirit of the music. It's just tremendous. So there you have it, the 5 greatest Mozart violinists. I'm interested in seeing your lists. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.